Today we're going to be finishing up that first set of notes, so we are going to be on the second page about halfway down where it says examples. The directions are write the following expressions in simplest form. So, looking at this problem, notice we have several terms inside the parentheses. So, first thing that I want you to do is kind of go through and we're going to rewrite the square root of xy, and we're going to raise that to a power. So I have this negative 8 raised to the first power, x is raised to the first power, and then I have this quantity of xy raised to the 1/2 power, because that was in square roots. And this whole thing is raised to the 2/3 power. And before I even adjust this 2/3 power, we need to do a little bit more work inside the parentheses. So notice this quantity of xy raised to the 1/2 power. Well, they both are going to get the 1/2. So I could say negative 8 to the first, x to the first, x to the 1/2, and y to the 1/2. Still all raised to the 2/3. Now, before I go on with the 2/3, again, we could do a little bit more condensing inside the parentheses. This x to the first power and x to the 1/2 power, if I'm multiplying those, I can add the exponents. So we need to add a 1 and a 1/2. So I'm just going to jot this down off to the side on how to do that. Again, you may use a calculator to do that part. I don't care if you want to use the calculator. So if I do 1 plus 1/2, we could think of this 1 as like a 1 over 1. And if I need common denominators, I want to multiply it by a 2 over 2. So this fraction would be 2 over 2 plus 1 over 2. So the fractions, when I add them together, will be a total of 3/2. So going back to the problem, negative 8 to the first power, x to the 3/2 power, y to the 1/2 power, all raised to the 2/3. So now that I've condensed as much as possible, now we're going to bring that 2/3 into the problem. Okay, so I'm going to switch my screen so I have a little bit more room. So I'm going to distribute this 2/3 power into all of these exponents. So it will now be negative 8, 1 times 2/3, and then x raised to the 3/2 times 2/3, and then we have y to the 1/2 times 2/3. And when we're multiplying our exponents, we multiply straight through top, straight through bottom. So over here, this is like saying negative 8 raised to the 2/3. And here, for my x's, we have a 3 times 2 in the top and a 2 times 3. So essentially, we'll get x raised to the 6 over 6, which we know will simplify to be 1. And for my y values, I get y to the 2 over 6. So we're going to do some simplifying of my exponents, and I'm also going to put this negative 8 to the 2/3 back in radical form. So this is the cube root of negative 8 squared. And here, this will be x to the first power, and this will be y to the 1/3 power. And remember, we talked about being able to simplify our values. So I could do a negative 8 squared and then take the cube root of it, or I could take the cube root first and then square it. So if I took the cube root of negative 8, I get negative 2, but that is still raised to the second power. I still have my x, and I still have my y to the 1/3. And a negative 2 squared, well, negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4, x, and instead of saying y to the 1/3 power, we'll change it back to being the cube root of y. So this is a fairly involved problem. There is a lot of steps, but as long as you follow the rules, it's not a terrible problem. So just got to follow your exponent rules. Letter B is a little bit shorter than letter A. So same thing, we're going to imply, so 16 is raised to the first power, y is raised to the negative 8. Letter A, we had to do a lot of work inside the parentheses. I do not need to do that in this case. I can just distribute my exponent in. So this will be 16 raised to the negative 3 over 4. And then y to the negative 8, and I'm going to write it as negative 8 over 1 times the negative 3 over 4. So the first one, my 16 to the negative 3 over 4, I don't have any exponents to multiply it with, so at this point I'm now going to put it back in radical form. So the 4th root of 16 raised to the negative 3. And we'll have y to the 24th power over 4, because we multiply straight through top, straight through bottom. So the 4th root of 16 is 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. So this is 2 to the negative 3rd power. And this will be y to the 6th power. And now notice we still have a negative exponent, and the negative exponent says that I have to send that term to the bottom of the fraction. But what is left up top is this y to the 6th, because these two things were working together. They were in one whole problem. So the y to the 6th stays in the top where it is. The 2 to the 3rd power gets sent to the bottom. And last thing that we could do is actually do 2 to the 3rd power, which is 8. So our final answer will be y to the 6th over 8. And that is all for today.